Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So Wiccan's deep dive is out and he does look quite interesting. Now there is still quite a bit of ambiguity about his numbers, and obviously deep dives are always a fairly horrible indicator of that. That being said, he does have access to very interesting stuff, some of the stuff that we already have seen, but in fairly unusual ways and formats. So he's going to be a Mystic champion, obviously benefiting from Mystic Dispersion as well. The coolest things about him is Plasma, Incinerate, and Shock, additionally to Neutralize. And that in itself kind of already forms a fairly solid kit. He's also immune to armor breaks and reverse controls, so I know a lot of people who are going to be super happy about another champion that's immune to reverse controls. Right. He does have negative 1000 physical resistance. That also means that he's going to be extremely susceptible to Rapture debuffs, because Rapture deals damage based on physical resistance. So anybody that can inflict Rapture is going to do quite a bit of extra damage to Wiccan, even though he does have ways how to increase his physical and energy resistance further on in the fight. Now here we can see that he deals energy damage instead of physical, like a lot of Mystic champions. Also, when struck by true damage, instantly gain 40% of the power gain from hit. So that is going to be obviously largely defensive ability. And true damage is basically true strike or true damage buff champions, such as Corvus, for instance. Corvus always has either true strike or true damage active. If inflicted with a concussion or disorient debuff from a science champion, one personal passive or a debuff caused by Wiccan is removed. That is going to be, I feel, quite key to fighting against the guy, because he's effectively over time going to be putting on incinerates on you and tapping away from you. Right, so this screenshot is kind of like a bit of a flop, but the base idea is that he has 4 different spells and he activates them with different sequences. Now, one is dash back and hold block for 1.2 seconds, and that is going to increase his physical and energy resistance, and you can stack that up to 3 times. Obviously they are still timed, but whenever he activates new spells that are not already active, he pauses everything for 6 seconds, and also does the same thing with special attacks. Then further on, whenever he finishes a full combo with a medium attack, he inflicts a weak incinerate on opponent, but those can be utilized later. If he finishes a combo with a light attack, he inflicts neutralize on the opponent. And then if he heavies, he gains a power gain buff. And that also lets him nullify fury buff, precision buff, or a power gain buff. So that is the only flat out nullification ability that he has in his kit. The rest of it has to be done via neutralize, which I actually like recently. I've been finding neutralize more and more valuable, which is also obviously a key reason why Tiger is so powerful, one of the key reasons. So he has access to minimal nullification abilities as Mystic Champion, but also very decent access to neutralize. Also, if he gets auto-blocked, he automatically places a neutralize debuff on opponents as well. However, it was not mentioned that he goes stun immune, so it's gonna be useful in some matchups. However, if those auto-blocks trigger parry, then not that much. Right, as a defender, obviously, he also casts these spells automatically once every 10 seconds, I believe, but the timer is reset if you do knock him down. Here we can see the nullification in action, and that's again that bit of a play with a heavy attack. Now he's level 1. His level 1 does basically 3 things. Number 1, it gives you a regeneration buff that regenerates X amount of your lost health. And if that lost health was via bursts of energy damage, then it regenerates all of your lost health. So that regen can be extremely powerful in some specific situations, but that regen could potentially also make him somewhat Liquid Courage Double Edge friendly. That would need to be tested how well he can handle that. I hope that it could actually work in like more day-to-day setup, but we're gonna see about that, because obviously poison will reduce the potency of that regeneration quite drastically. Then on top of that, his level 1 recasts 2 of the spells that were last activated, so you can inflict more incinerates with it or increase your resistance with it based on like what have you done last with Wiccan, basically. And he has an additional ability whenever his immunity is triggered, he inflicts incinerates on opponents. So in some matchups, he's going to be able to inflict an absolute butt ton of incinerates, like going up against Terex, for instance, where he's consistently being armor broken, or something like that. So he has immunity to armor break and reverse controls. Right, and the level 2 is a main damage dealer, and the level 2 basically inflicts 7 shock debuffs, so 1 shock for each hit, and then it also gives you power efficiency buff. The power efficiency buff attacking is very short, its duration is only 3 seconds, however it's increased by additional 3 seconds for each spell active, so you can make it last quite a bit longer. It's also paused during special attacks. The key trick kind of is to combine your shocks and incinerates into plasmas. So whenever you inflict an incinerate, if you have a shock active, it's going to be combined into plasma. Whenever you inflict shock whilst incinerate is active, it's going to be combined into plasma. Now, plasmas cannot be paused, but they will be dealing significantly more damage. So his rotations have to revolve around finishing combos with mediums or throwing in some level 1s in order to get more incinerates, and then dropping level 2s to combine them into plasma. Kind of like Mystic version of Iron Man Infinity War, in a sense. Except the fact that he's Mystic, he has access to Mystic Dispersion, he has access to power gain and power efficiency, so you should be able to drop many more plasmas, even though you can't consistently maintain them on. You should be able to execute your rotations quite a bit quicker. And that power efficiency is 30% power efficiency. It's not quite as potent as Professor X. However, I do think that he might synergize decently with some Mystic power boost as well when you drop your level 2s, for instance. But there is a problem with that also, that numbers-wise, he did seem to have very low crit rate, because I watched an entire level 2 being thrown of 7 hits without a single one of them critting. And the numbers didn't look too great either, so he might not get back that much power, obviously, from power boosts. So it is always hard to judge the damage in these deep dives, so I'm going to reserve my judgment there. But damage over time effects definitely seem quite potent, should we say. Right, now his signature ability, Resistance Up, also allows Wiccan to block unblockable attacks from Cosmic Champions. This can definitely be very useful because it doesn't have like any downside from blocking. You don't need to sacrifice your spells or anything like that. You just basically need to dash back, hold your block for 1.2 seconds, and then you can block unblockable attacks from Cosmics, which can be a very, very useful ability in my opinion. And then moving on, Incinerate effects have 50% chance not to consume shock debuffs when creating a plasma. Obviously that's quite nice, maintaining higher amount of incinerates. And then if the opponent is shock immune, shocks turn into degeneration with the same potency and duration, but count as shocks for Wiccan's other abilities. And this again just adds in more versatility in terms of what matchups you can use him against. For instance, you can go up against, I don't know, Korg or Storm or whoever else is shock immune. Right, his rotation again looked fairly convoluted, but I have a feeling it doesn't have to be strictly maintained in exact way how it was showcased in a deep dive. I didn't mention his special 3 because special 3, in my opinion, is fairly useless in vast majority of the fights. It just gives you an energy vulnerability debuff that obviously will let your damage or time effects do more damage, but it doesn't contribute anything to your base rotation, which is kind of how I like to keep these champion rotations. Level 3 is best to be kind of like left alone, in my opinion. Now, that being said, we can see that Wiccan there is quite beefy boy, and the damage over time numbers are definitely decent, but all of the individual hits on level 2 did seem to be quite weak. So he does seem like he's going to be gaining majority of his damage from all of these shocks, plasmas, and everything else. Again, I will not judge these numbers exactly because they typically are without masteries and stuff like that. So it doesn't look great, but it could be much better than it looks. So I'm going to leave it there. That's like one of the things that I had definitely learned over the years from these deep dives. Do not trust any numbers most of the time. Right, all that being said, let's check out the synergies. So he has synergy with Super Skull and Hood, where he increases the potency of his incinerates by 25%. And that actually means nothing, because those incinerates do that little amount of damage. Honestly, those incinerates were ticking for like 10 or 15 or 40 damage or something like that. That is not how you're going to do the damage. The shocks and plasmas are. So this one means nothing really for Wiccan, in my opinion. While Cosmic Energy Overload buff is active, launching special attack will trigger Cosmic Energy Overload based on how many Cosmic Energy Receptors buffs are active. It just kind of means that you will speed up Super Skull's rotation, and he's going to have a bit more fun shenanigans. I do think he needs more than that, but I do think this is also quite significant for Super Skull. And then for Hood, this energy again I think is kind of a bit pointless because you never really want to throw your level 3s with Hood, you want to spam your level 2s. Once per fight, special 3 grants no power, and the opponent counts as having 1 extra bar of power, thus you get more special 3 damage, but again, nobody uses special 3 on Hood because it just doesn't do anything. Right, this one is quite cool, because we already have a synergy that lets Hawkeye turn his bleeds into poisons. Now he can also do the same thing with Raptures. I would have absolutely loved if these would be pre-fights on Hawkeye, but, you know, getting a synergy that does that is better than not having those abilities at all. So there is that. Again, I kind of would want this to be a pre-fight ability. So New Avengers gain 450 critical rating. You know, neat, I suppose. This one could be quite cool for Loki, to be honest. Finishing a combo with a light attack pauses curse for 4 seconds, which will significantly make it easier for Loki to maintain 100% curse uptime. And with 100% curse uptime, obviously you steal opponents' buffs, you deal damage over time, and there can be some fun things to be had with this synergy and Loki in some cheesy matchups, 100% without a doubt. Also, Wiccan last hit of special 2 inflicts a slow debuff for 10 seconds. It's cool. Having another champion that can access slow is always nice, but synergy for it, like, why would you do it? If you need a slow champion, you're gonna bring in slow champion. If you need a mystic slow champion, you're gonna bring in like Sorcerer Supreme or somebody. So, again, I don't think it's that important or that big of a deal for Wiccan. It definitely can come in handy, but I think we in the game are kind of past the point where we have to rely on synergies to access kind of basic things like this, especially if you're running with like mystic champions who typically nullify the unstoppables and stuff like that anyways. So unless you're dealing with passive slow, but again, you'd probably just bring in sorcerer or something, so don't care for this one too much. These ones are quite interesting. So when a buff fails to trigger due to reduced ability accuracy, Wiccan gains 2% of his max power. This can be very cheesy in some matchups because he can maintain that neutralize up pretty much entire time. So he can get quite a lot of power this way, for sure, without a doubt, going up against like resistors or, I don't know, some specific champions like Agans or whatever. So this could be very, very powerful for Wiccan and make him into a power gaining machine. Now we have Scarlet Witch, critical damage ratings increased by 750. Nice, useful for Scarlet. Sigil Witch, regain 50% of the instabilities removed when degeneration expired. This is actually very, very cool. Because, typically you kind of have to start from the scratch to revamp the Sigil Witch. So this would let your kind of cycle be a lot less cyclical and you wouldn't have that downtime in that aggression and power gaining and buff gaining phase. So I do think it's very viable for Sigil Witch, very important to have this energy. And then with Visions, whenever Visions intercept, you power burn opponents for 10% of their current power. Again, it's neat, it's definitely not a bad thing, but, I doubt Visions need much more extra help power controlling opponents typically. And the final one is when neutralizing the opponent, we can also inflict tracking debuff, bypassing the effects of miss. So he can be a miss counter with a synergy with Hulkling. So that's quite cool. So he is quite complex character, obviously, because it took me quite a long time to go through all of his abilities. For what it's worth, after the initial deep dives, I think I'm slightly more interested in Hulkling, just because I already have, perfect uses for the champion in my head. I do think that, he could potentially be viable in battlegrounds as an attacker, potentially as a defender and stuff like that. But with Wiccan, I'm still interested in the character. I'm definitely loving the neutralize and the fact that you can upkeep it for a long time. I am slightly worried about where you would exactly want to use him and whether his numbers are going to be up to par, but I'm going to push that aside. Other than that, I'm not the biggest fan of having these kind of like longer, super long, complicated rotations for the champions, which again is why I said I think you're probably going to be able to play Wiccan for most part, more simple. You're just going to build up to level 2, get that with as many spells active, drop that, get the shocks, and then start spamming Incinerates to combine them into Plasmas. And you can do that by, dropping a level 1 with that power efficiency buff and then see how the fight goes. So I definitely want to get my hands on both champions, test them out. They both seem sufficiently interesting as far as I'm aware. Slightly more interested in Hulkling at the moment. But Wiccan also definitely does seem quite cool. Immunity to reverse controls definitely is going to be quite big deal for some champions, for some players, sorry. Immunity to armor break, I don't personally, consider it to be that viable. So in immunity department, Hulkling definitely kind of wins there. But again, neutralize, power gain, fury, precision, and power gain nullification, shocks, incinerates, regen. So it does seem quite interesting. We'll see how it works out. Let me know what you guys think about Wiccan, and I'm gonna catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the